years of Legend of the Five Rings is a series of interviews celebrating 3 decades since the debut of L5R at Gen Con 1995. In this second series of the Play to Win podcast from Aconyte Books, we'll explore the perspectives of the people who had a hand in the franchise's making, past and present, the lasting impacts L5R has had on their lives, and what about L5R has made it an enduring force in the tabletop games industry after all these years. I'm your host, Katrina Ostrander, and I'm the creative director of story and setting with the franchise development team at Asmodee. I've had the privilege of working on L5R in various roles since 2015, including as writer, fiction editor, RPG developer, and story lead. In my current role, I help oversee the brand's development as it expands further into novels, comic books, video games, board games, and more. But before that, I was simply a big fan of the setting. In this first episode, we start at the beginning of Legend of the Five Rings, and I'm joined by 2 of the people responsible for the game's creation, John Zinser and Ryan Dancey. I asked them about the game's origins and inspirations, what it was like launching a collectible card game when the bottom dropped out of the market, and what they did to survive. I also got to ask them about their plans, or perhaps lack thereof, leading up to the game's supposed end at the second day of Thunder at Gen Con 1997. We didn't get through all my questions for them, so our conversation continues in the next episode. But let's dive in. I am joined by John Zinser and Ryan Dancey of Alderac Entertainment, and really grateful to have you on today. Thank you so much for taking the time. I wanted to talk to you both because you had a major hand in the creation of Legend of the Five Rings. And I wanted to ask each of you to introduce yourselves, starting with you, John.
I am John Zinser. I'm the owner of Alderac Entertainment Group. I started the company 32 years ago, and our first actual product was Legend of the Five Rings. So this 30th anniversary is very exciting for us to talk about.
And you, Ryan?
I'm Ryan Dancey. I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer at AEG. And in 1995, I was part of the team that helped to create Legend of the Five Rings. Subsequently, I worked at Wizards of the Coast. I was the Vice President of Tabletop Role-Playing Games and the Brand Manager for Dungeons & Dragons. Then I spent some time in the digital world making computer games and ended up right back where I started in the tabletop business working with John.
That sounds like it was an adventure. So both of you are heavily involved in the creation of Legend of the Five Rings. I suppose we could say that you're the 2 co-creators of the card game and the setting?
So the credits for the Imperial Edition of Legend of the Five Rings credit John and his business partner at the time, Dave Say, as the co-creators. And then there were 5 other people that it would be fair to say are the core team that created the game itself. Dave Williams, DJ Trindle, Matt Wilson, Matt Starozik, John Wick. Boy, I hope I'm not forgetting anybody.
Oh, that's the team.
John and I were kind of the 2-headed monster. John was responsible for running his team, and I was responsible for running my team. So we were kind of the 2 people at the top who had to make the rest of the group go.
So how did Legend of the Five Rings come about as a card game?
So in 1993, our company was not really even a company yet. We were helping a guy named Jolly Blackburn publish his magazine Shadis. And we went to Gen Con to officially launch the magazine into sort of the big time. And Ryan had run as a side business. Ryan he had started a business selling role-playing game books. And so he ran an ad in Dragon Magazine, and I found him through that ad and got him to buy an ad in Shadis. And he came to Gen Con that year, and that was the year that Magic the Gathering happened. I mean, that convention was nuts. And we had never been to a Gen Con before. And so we didn't realize how unique that moment was in the history of gaming. The gaming industry had been small game companies putting out role-playing games, and Magic the Gathering literally changed the face of the business in less than a year. Ryan and I met at the show, and we walked around talking about things what we were seeing at the show and how interesting Magic the Gathering was. And we talked about, maybe we could do, came up with ideas and thought maybe we could do a product like that.
It's hard to remember this now, but trading card games were new. You know, chess and board games, they have an ancient history, thousands of years of history. And role-playing games, they started in the 70s. John and I are in the third or fourth generation of people who played role-playing games. But trading card games were totally new. Nobody knew really anything about them or how to make them or even how they were made. So it was a wide open field. People tried all kind of crazy ideas and did strange things because we were all just kind of learning as we went. There was nobody you could ask for advice. There was no rule book. There was no history. The only real thing that had ever existed was magic. And it was such a phenomenon. It was hard to tell the difference between the phenomenon part and the game part. So it was an exciting time.
So you took a look at a game like Magic and you were like, we could do something like that.
That's 100% what happened. Yeah. What we really did was in 1994, we looked at all of the people who tried to make the second generation of games, the people who had less than a year from the time Magic was released to make their idea a game. And we both basically thought we could do better than pretty much everything that we saw. We were young and arrogant, and so we did.
Yeah, so what were some of the inspirations that went into the CCG that you decided to make for Legend of the Five Rings?
So our first role-playing game, for my group, our first role-playing game was Dungeons and Dragons. And our second role-playing game was this little teeny tiny role-playing game called Bushido. It was these little books. It was very, it was niche of niche at the time. It was the only role-playing game that had a samurai focus. And we did a lot of role-playing in that universe. And that was the universe which sort of inspired Dave and I to say, let's make a game about samurai. But we, as a group, we whiteboarded out a number of ideas. And our whiteboard had samurai, cowboys, and pirates on it. And we ultimately ended up making a game in all of those genres. But L5R was the first one.
Yeah, in the 90s, especially in the early 90s, Japan and Japanese things were really exciting and interesting to people in the United States. The West Coast just has a lot of Japanese influence because there are a lot of Japanese people who live here. So the kind of samurai ninja thing was just in the air. It was a genre that a lot of people thought was really exciting and interesting. And it was also not very saturated. There just hadn't been that much stuff in that genre. There had been the Shogun miniseries in the 80s, and anime was just kind of starting to really have an impact and kind of get out of the very small niche that it had started in and grow into a more popular and well understood phenomenon. So we were kind of riding that wave of Japan is cool, samurai ninja is cool. But one of the things that we did really early on, it turned out to be a very good decision, is we did not attempt to make a game about Japan or a historical Japanese game. We really just took the stuff we thought was cool from anime and kung fu movies and novels and stuff that we kind of heard about. And we just made a pastiche of the stuff that we liked and that we thought was cool. We never tried to tell people this is authentic or it's historical or it's based on any, research. And because we didn't do that, I think it gave us the freedom to do a lot of cool stuff and not try to fit in that box. But it also relieved us from any obligation to be accurate. Like, it just didn't matter. I've often told people that Legend of the Five Rings probably feels to a Japanese person like if an American was told that it's a game about Abraham Lincoln riding a dinosaur, fighting on a volcano in Hawaii against, Cossacks and horse riding Mongols. Like, it's just a mishmash of stuff all thrown together in a way that we thought was cool.
But it definitely resonated, right? Like the clans are so iconic to this day and people identify with them so strongly. You still see people wearing their sports jerseys, their Scorpion Clan sports jerseys at Gen Cons year after year.
The clans in particular are not accidental. Our idea was that there are different kinds of people who play games, and we kind of intuitively worked out a definition of what those people would be. That actually mirrored work that was going on inside Wizards of the Coast, although I don't think we were super aware of it. Wizards has a different way of approaching their player breakdowns, but they identify different kinds of people who play trading card games in particular with different personality types. And we did kind of the same thing, and each of the clans is designed to appeal to what we thought were one of those personality types. They're not just random, things that we needed for the game. They're supposed to make you feel like you're really invested in them.
Could you kind of like lift the curtain a little bit and reveal like some of the secret sauce that goes into some of these clans?
We realized that there was a certain type of person that was going to be is going to be honor before anything else. There's a certain kind of person that's going to believe that sacrifice was the most important thing. There's a certain kind of people who are going to say, you do what you must, and you would make any decision no matter what.
The Dragon Clan were people who were into the mystery of it all, the philosophy of the world. The Unicorn Clan represented people who wanted to be very clever in playing the game. They would have the ability to win with their tactics as they played, as opposed to necessarily to their deck building. Each of the clans had something like that. It was a personality type, and then it was associated with a part of the game mechanic. Defending, attacking, spells, that kind of thing, right? And then we built the clans, we built the personalities and the things that they used to connect with those ideas. So if you were the kind of person who said, oh yeah, I'm all about ruthless aggression, I'm going to play the Lion Clan, you would find that the Lion Clan cards fed into that and reinforced that and let you do that thing. After it became huge and there was 5,000 cards, things got added to let people do all sorts of different things. But in the beginning, when it was new, it was very narrowly tailored so that we hoped that you would find a clan that you really identified with, and then you could play that clan.
Yeah. The other thing that strikes me is when I asked you about the inspirations, you talked about like the role-playing games that you started out with. And
Yep.
One of the things that really differentiated L5R from the other CCGs of that era was the storyline involvement.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could talk about like how that came about, because is what people remember, right? It's why L5R is like the greatest gaming story ever told, according to Matt Colville.
I think that every person on the L5R team, all 8 people that were on the L5R team were all role-playing game inspired enthusiasts. I think that everybody on the team, sounds maybe Dave Williams, really wanted to be in the role-playing game business as well as be in the card game business. And so everything we did, once we realized we were doing a sweeping samurai tale and that we were going to give the personalities in the game, characters in the game personality, and connect their story at a much deeper than, flavor text level, right? Like, you get games and like, oh, that guy was the champion of the third age. And players they're like, oh, what was the third age? What happened with that champion? But with L5R, it was like, this character was the champion of the third age. And that's the beginning of this deep dive of the relationship between that character and 3 characters from other clans, and this deep tragedy and love story and all of that stuff that was happening that our team really embraced and had a good time, filling in the gaps and actually, creating the characters that were going to live the story arc that we were setting up.
So I said earlier that one of the things that was unique about that time is that nobody had done these things before. And so it was very wide open. So we were actually responding in part to a criticism that was in the mix in that era, which is, I don't like the idea that there's no ending to this. We heard from a lot of people, I don't want to get started on some thing and I'm never going to know how it ends. Ending something was, at the time, it was considered a kind of a big deal. The idea that these things would run forever was a negative, not a positive. So we designed Legend of the Five Rings to have an ending. And that decision all by itself, that drove the idea that there had to be an arc and that there would be a story, that it wasn't just going to be a thing that existed and then it just continued for all time. Because it was going to have an ending, it naturally emerged that there had to be points along the arc of the story to get us to the ending. And so that was the first thing that was really unusual, is that it had a story. Magic doesn't have a story. Magic is a story. Magic is a story about wizards who battle for control of the universe. Later on, they built stories into that world, but when Magic was released, there was no story of Magic. Magic was just a game that you told a story with. So the idea that our game was going to have a story was a whole new idea. Then the second order thing that was crazy was us saying, and we're going to let the players have a big role in deciding how that story turns out. That was like 2 orders of magnitude down the path from where we started with Magic.
So it was, the storyline was essentially a gigantic community role-playing game.
Yeah, that's what it turned into.
Yeah, and you kind of see that, like, there's still some fan sites that are live that you can go visit where people like, I'm going to become the curator of the Dragon Clan's records, and I have the Lion Clan archives, and like people got really into it. Do you have any like specific memories of like people that created like personas around like who they were playing, or like how did the role playing inspiration kind of hook people, or how did that manifest in the games?
So I think that we have to go back to the era that Legend of the Five Rings was sort of launched in. When after Magic came out, those early adopters, the people that put out collectible trading card games in 1994, that was a unique moment for the gaming industry because every one of those games sold more cards and made more money than anybody in the gaming industry had ever made before. And then even more companies decided that this was the thing that we were going to do. And we were well into designing Legend of the Five Rings at that time. And right around the time that we got L5R done, the first collectible trading card game crash happened. And it was crazy because we had printed, I don't know, a few thousand cases of product, and we had pre-orders for all of it. And we were celebrating because we were like, okay, we are off to the races. This is going to be amazing. And then we got a phone call from one of our distributors who said, oh, we're not going to take all of that product. And over the course of the next,
What?
we went from, oh my God, we didn't print enough, to 8 weeks later, like our orders had shrunk by a magnitude of, it went from every product that we had sold down to about 30% of the product sold.
Wow.
Not enough money to cover all of our bills that we had racked up in making the game and all of our expectations for how we were going to move on and do other great things. A whole bunch of companies experienced that exact same thing. And a number of companies that released games in the window just after we got out saw their pre-orders completely dry up. They didn't sell almost any games at all. And those businesses, well, they failed on the spot. The companies that did have collectible trading card games out had got them out earlier than we did. They had a lot of money. And their solution to the problem was to spend more money on advertising. We saw magazine advertising and things come out right after the crash was happening, where people were doing 4-page spreads and just like filling the magazines with 4 or 5 different ads for their game, doing stuff that we just couldn't do. The only thing that we had was we had a game that people, the people who played it, we liked it, and we had product that we hadn't sold. And so we connected with the player base in a very, very personal way. Ryan has a story about the first guy that ever did an L5R demo for us, and that was a real light bulb moment for our company.
Yeah, we were at the first GAMA trade show that we attended to sell the game to retailers, and we had been doing demos for retailers in our booth. And this kid came up to us and he says, if I teach people how to play your game, will you give me a t-shirt? And so we were like, yeah, we'd love to take a break. Here's a shirt, kid. And that kid sat there and taught for 2 days. Like, his parents were retailers and they just went off and did the show. And that kid just sat in our booth and taught people how to play. Remember, this is a game he had never seen before. He learned how to play it on the first day from us and then became like the guy who taught some unknown number of retailers about that game for a t-shirt. And we were like, okay, like, that's a thing. People will help us spread the word of this game. They'll help us make it a bigger game, get more people connected. And all they really want is some connection back to the product. And I mean, t-shirts, a simple thing, but it was kind of an eye-opening moment that we had something that people wanted to help us make bigger.
So you didn't have the advertising budget, but you did have like word of mouth and personal presence?
So there was a group of people in LA that was based around the AEG offices, and there's a group of people in the Seattle area that was based around the offices of my company. But from those 2 points, we just spread out as far as we could, teaching as many people as we could and trying to get people to do this thing to then become the teachers. So we would, every weekend, we would go to retail stores and conventions and just demo. And our whole marketing plan became demos. Like, we didn't hardly spend money on anything except demos. That was it.
Yeah, we had printed Imperial Edition, and we, like I said, we'd only sold about 30% of it. And our first push to sell more product was an offer to distribution, which then went to retails, which was, if you buy a display of decks and a display of boosters, we guarantee that we will get a demo in your store.
Wow.
Which was a promise that no company in their right mind should ever have made. And we had no clue how we were going to fulfill that promise. Ryan had a person working for him who was the person who was our community manager. And the internet back then was not what the internet is today. It was like chat rooms and
email.
And email. And so we had game stores in the weirdest places in the United States. Like, oh, I own a game store. I always talk about Tupelo, Mississippi. I own a game store in Tupelo, Mississippi. I'm going to buy a display of L5R decks and L5R boosters because I will get a demo in that store. And we had stores in Iowa and Nebraska and places that you couldn't fly to them. You had to fly into Kansas City and drive across the country to get to those stores. But we found a way to go to all of those stores or get, Mindy was her name, got volunteers who were players of the game to go out to the different stores and do demos. And communities of L5R players blossomed in the most outskirty, weird places that you would never expect them. You'd think, oh, there's a big community in Chicago or a big community in New York. That really wasn't the case with L5R at the beginning. There were big communities in Iowa and in Mississippi and in Nebraska and in places where they had never connected with a game company in the way that they were connecting with AEG and L5R. The reality of Legend of Five Rings is that it wouldn't exist without the community. Todd Rowland, who got his job with us back in the day, got it because he ran the storyline was going to kill the ogres in the game for some reason. And he did this crazy Save the Ogres personal marketing campaign to the L5R community to get them to vote to not get rid of the ogres. And that ended up getting him a job with our company because it was such an engaging moment. Mark Wooten, who is currently our lead designer, the senior person at our company, I think he's 64 years old. He lived in Fife, Scotland. He was a ranger in Fife, Scotland, and he became enamored with Legend of the Five Rings. He's a great, great CCG player. And so he built a little community in Fife of people to play with and was winning all of his matches. And he contacted Mindy and said, hey, can I run a city championship to get more players to come play? And Mindy was like, yeah, of course, you can do that. We'll send you some boosters to give away as prizes. And so he built a city championship. And he was like, can I run a national championship? And we're like, oh, holy mackerel. This guy's organizing a community in Scotland to run a national championship. And we realized that of these demo people that were out there sort of evangelizing L5R, there were a number of them doing very similar things in their communities. And that blossomed into the idea of these events all over the world that became Kotais, our national events, which were feeders into the World Championship that we would host at Gen Con. We basically just gave them permission to do the cool things that they wanted to do at the events. And because there were no guardrails around what we would allow people to do, their imaginations they threw parties of all sorts of different kinds based around clans. And they would call us up and say, hey, we want to do this cool storyline. Can we do it? And we're like, sure. I mean, that doesn't sound too crazy.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean they would ask you, can we do this cool storyline? Did they come up with some of the ideas for these tournaments?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you give us some examples?
I don't know if I can pick a specific example of a storyline event that happened at Aconyte, but the L5R story arc started and was moving towards the Day of Thunder.
Mhm.
And we had a framework for that story arc, and we had put the characters inside of it. But we were very committed to telling deep little slices of the story of the relationships of the character, but not moving the story towards the Day of Thunder along on how we thought things should end. We had told the players that how the story ends will be up to you. Like every major decision in the story was impacted by a role playing or a CCG event. And there were really good players who formed two cabals that were secret to AEG. Mark was a member of one of them. But these players basically got together and decided that they were going to drive the story where they wanted it to go through winning events. And so they would have meetings and talk about sending members from their players to win different events so that they would get the effect over the storyline. And I mean, we didn't know it all the way up until the actual Day of Thunder that there were actually players behind the screens, like with marionettes telling us where to go, with the storyline decisions that they wanted to happen.
We tried to use the improv theater rule. Yes, and somebody would contact us and say, I want to do this thing. And we would try really hard to always say yes. And then we would put boundaries or guardrails around that thing so that it was not going to just, turn into Bodie McBoatface. We want to name some city. Okay, here are your options. Right? Mm-hmm. You don't get to just tell us it's going to be called Bodie McBoatface. You get to choose from one of these three things based on what happens at your event. It was very much designed around the idea that we knew the plot. There was going to be a struggle for control of the throne and that factions were going to rise and fall. And then at the end, there was going to be this big battle that would, determine the fate of the world. But that was it. And we intentionally didn't write more than that. There was never a document that said, chapter 1, this happens. Chapter 2, this happens. Chapter 3, this happens. It was all intentionally kept extremely vague, which allowed us to say yes to lots of people when they brought their creative ideas in and they wanted to participate. It would have been so hard for us to come up with all of those ideas and all of that stuff that got done. It was so much better that it was coming from the community, kind of reflecting off our design team who were crafting the and part of the yes message. Mm-hmm. And then that reflection would bounce back and forth between the design team and the community. And then it would not infrequently show up as something actually in the game. It would be reflected in the text of a card, which just made all those people that much more determined to do it because they were seeing a real world result of the hard work they were putting in to try to be creative.
Yeah.
I mean, we had people on the design team who were unhappy about some of the decisions that got made. Dave Williams was very unhappy when the decision was made to have the Lion Clan champion commit ritual suicide as a way to pave the path for Toturi to return. He wasn't angry because he thought it was a bad choice. He was unhappy because he liked her. He didn't want her to die.
Poor Matsutsuko.
Poor Matsusuko. I killed Matsusuko. In fact, Dave killed Matsusuko. We were having a meeting to determine how the story was going to move down the line.
Yeah.
Everybody around the table, and somebody said, we could have Matsusuko commit seppuku, which is like the ultimate sacrifice that a samurai is going to make. Mm-hmm. And Dave turned red in the meeting and got up and said, no, you won't. He pointed a finger at the person who said it, says, no, you will not kill Matsusuka. And I was like, yeah, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
That sealed her fate. If that's
the reaction. Exactly.
Because he's not going to be the only one who feels that way.
Yes, exactly.
And he wasn't. People were stunned. They were stunned that happened. And it definitely lifted up the story towards the Day of Thunder in ways that...
Yeah, it made the stakes feel very real to people because they cared about these characters. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were willing to kill them off. Like, this is still early days of A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. Red Wedding hadn't sunk into people's collective consciousness yet.
For sure.
No, I think that we were running parallel to him, and we had no fear in the early days of giving characters what we called a good death, right? Like you can kill characters, but you have to give them a great death, a story that people are going to talk about, which elevates the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it didn't hurt that it was a samurai game.
Yeah.
In a samurai environment, people are going to commit seppuku. That's just, I mean, that wasn't some weird out of bounds thing. That was clearly just part of the genre. So, yeah, it made it a lot. It made that medicine go down a lot easier, I think, because it was appropriate to the genre.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking now about some of the other characters that suffered like terrible or tragic fates, like Hida Sukune and Doji Hotori, and
Yeah. So there's a printing error in Imperial Edition, which led directly to one of those characters suffering. So the Crab Clan have an Oni in the Imperial Edition, and that Oni was supposed to have a different name. And there's a typo, and the name that got onto that card was the name of the champion's son. So there was two cards in the Imperial Edition who had the same card name. One was a human and one is a demon, an Oni. And that was an error. And
what?
Yes. And we said, well, what are we going to do about that? And the design team came back and said, here is this elaborate in-world explanation for how you summon an Oni. And it has to be bound to the name of a real person in order for it to manifest itself physically in the world, not just as a spirit. And that means that somebody had to do that to that guy. And the only person who could do that was his father. And so that led into the contest in the first Imperial Herald, where the fans were asked to vote which of the champions would fall. And they had voted for Hida Kasada, the champion of the Crab Clan, to fall. And so that printing error became the mechanism by which we expressed the fact that he had foregone part of his honor to make a deal with evil forces because he felt it was the only option available to him given the rising strength of Fuleng. And he had to basically bind a part of his own son's soul to a demon in order to make that happen because of a printing error.
I had no idea that Yakumo no Oni came about. You know, we think it's like, oh, like, you know, they had this planned all along, like accidental genius.
Yep. And then that led into a whole thing. Like he gets the emerald hand, the jade hand, because he needs something to help keep his soul from being leached out of his body by this Oni. So he's got the jade hand is like his anchor on reality.
That's incredible.
So good.
Yeah, it just goes on and on and on and on. But once you start from the premise of yes and you just kind of learn to live with this stuff, it does create like a lot of really great storytelling. It forces you to become a great storyteller. It forced us to do having that attitude forced us to do lots of things we would have never done if we had just tried to write it all down at the beginning and then run the program. And we would have never gotten that level of cool stuff in there.
I mean, it didn't hurt that we were like a bright shining star that like a black hole that sucked in talent at that time.
Right.
Dave Williams came to work for our company when I was looking for an intern to help us with Shadis magazine. And I got interviews from like 5 or 6 people, and he was the only guy to show up in a tie for the intern interview. My partner Dave said, well, what do you think? And I'm like, the guy that showed up in a tie? It's like, I mean, he really wanted the job, and the guy's a genius, one of the best game designers I have met in the 32 years that I've been doing this. Matt Wilson worked at a local game store.
Yeah.
He was just working at a local game store, and he heard that we were making the game, and he, like, hey, I heard you guys are doing this game, and started showing up at the office. And when it came time to order art for the game, nobody were like, okay, who's going to do this? He's like, oh, well, I could, I'll handle it. I'll be the art director. And so he went off and he started art directing. And then he disappeared for a few days, right? I'm like, where is Matt? I'm like, I don't know. Nobody knows where Matt's at. I'm like, 4 days later, he finally showed back up at the office with the first picture of the Dragon Clan champion.
He did this.
Oh my goodness.
We're showing you the picture that was on the original Legends of Five Rings poster.
That's the first piece of L5R art ever made. He just made that in like 3 days.
Wow. It's a depiction of Togashi Yokuni, who is like a legendary character, like the champion of the Dragon Clan at the beginning.
Yes.
And that art piece is also the Battle of Baden Pass cover for the starter set. And it's like half the size of Ryan, by the way, for those of you who can't see. It's like 3 feet tall.
Yeah. It's crazy how good that piece of art was. When we were developing this game, we were just a bunch of people who had decided we were going to make games for a living. We didn't have, any real investment money. The money that we had gotten from Ryan's partners was going to cover the printing of the game, and that was pretty much it. So nobody was making any money to work on this product. And I remember going back into my office after seeing that out and calling my buddy Dave, my partner Dave, and saying, "Oh my God, we're gonna have to figure out how to pay this person
Pay
some more
these
money
people.
before anybody sees his artwork." Like, I've never seen anything quite that, amazing. And John Wick was like a gift from the gods, right? That guy could just emote stories, right? Like, you get in a room with him and he was so good at the, yes and portion of Legend of the Five Rings that having him be our first story person was amazing, right? Like, the players would say something and he would, just yes and them down rabbit holes that were so deep and interesting that they really, really engaged players.
Yeah.
And each of those people sort of brought one of their friends to the company. Our amazing editor, DJ Trindle, was Dave Williams' friend who just started showing up at the office. And the guy that ended up doing all of our graphics and tech work was a guy named Matt Starozik, who was one of Matt Wilson's friends, who also just like wake up one day and we're in the office. I'm like, who is that guy that's sitting at that computer, doing, oh, that's my friend Matt. He's, helping us out with graphics and stuff. So, and just all like as talented as any person I've worked with in the gaming industry. There was nobody on that team that we wouldn't recruit to work right now on a new product that we were building. And that's a high compliment because we've worked with some unbelievably talented people in the time that we've done this.
Amazing people. Yeah. There were some other people that we should probably mention just so we don't forget. There were some fans that were really active. Zen Fox was a guy who did a lot of fan organizing. There's a guy named Jeff Alexander who did a lot of stuff, fan organizing.
He became a designer later on for the game.
Yeah. Those are just two names I can think of off the top of my head. I know there are a lot of people in that time that are probably right now screaming, I was there, and I'm sorry I don't remember well enough. It was 30 years ago. My memory is like Swiss cheese, but they were there. They mattered.
Leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube. So I also want to get you guys talking about the Day of Thunder because that might be probably the moment that L5R went down in history, like in the tabletop games industry. So you were talking about how L5R was unique in that it was going to have an ending.
Yeah.
And all of these tournaments, all of this effort, like culminated at Gen Con 1997.
Yeah.
Can you peel back the curtain for us a little bit? Like, how did that come about? What planning went into that? What are some highlights of that day for both of you?
So I think one of the things that probably shocks people the most is knowing that there was no plan.
What?
We did not know who the Thunders were going to be until we made the Time of the Void expansion. We didn't know because it had to happen as an organic part of the story evolving. And so, like, if you had asked us when we released Imperial Edition, well, who are the Thunders? We could not have told you. We did not know. We didn't even really know what Thunders were going to do or how they were going to interact with Fu Lang. All we knew was that there would be a thing called the Day of Thunder. And on that day, Fu Lang would face a reckoning. And it was not defined that Fu Lang was going to lose. Like, that was a critical part of it, it was not definitive that he would lose. So part of the buildup for the Day of Thunder event was the buildup of all of the story to explain what was going to happen at that event, which is, I think, one of the reasons it was so impactful, because it just wasn't rigged. It was all real.
Yes. So people came from all over the world to participate in the Day of Thunder. And we had gone out and bought these awesome colored clan t-shirts with the Day of Thunder and the big clan mon on it. And they were in the clan colors. And if you signed up for the Day of Thunder, you got your clan t-shirt. And so L5R players immediately put their shirts on, and the L5R tournament area and the convention was a sea of rainbow of clan colored shirts of people who were participating in the Day of Thunder. And one of my favorite moments, I tear up every time I talk about this. I'm tearing up before I tell the story. Everybody was in this gigantic room, and the tournament organizers were putting the event together. And John Wick jumped up on a chair and screamed, "Dragons, let me hear you roar!" And a whole bunch of fans, like everybody stopped, and the dragons, just screamed, and a lot of lion players at the event. And then he went down through all of the clans. Crabs, defend the wall, and they, went berserk, and they were just big groups of players in their t-shirts. And at that time, when we got to the Day of Thunder, there were 10 clans now, 10 factions.
There was a ton. There was a lot.
Yeah, just too many. We had segmented it more than we would have liked to. We did new clan decks with every expansion. The people were like, "Oh, I want to be, I want to play Ratlings. I want to play,
Right.
Something else." And one of the factions was the Mantis clan, a faction called Yoritomo's Alliance. And, like Katrina, you obviously know your L5R history is better or as well as we do. Yoritomo was the single baddest man in the Empire, right? Like he was the person you did not want to face in single combat, but he ran a ragtag group of pirates in the Mantis clan. And that faction had no chance of winning the Day of Thunder. They didn't have a super strong deck archetype at that time. And they were sort of an oh, by the way thing. And so when we got around to, like, everybody was cheering for the fans, John said, "Yoritomo's Alliance." And like in this room, it's like 400 people. It was dead silent. Like not a single person said anything. And then he goes, "Yoritomo?" And this kid, must have been 13 or 14 years old, stands up in the back of the room and goes, "Yoritomo!"
Wow.
Standing ovation.
I pointed at him and somebody took my picture. So I have a photo of me recognizing that guy at the back of the room, being the only Yoritomo player in the whole building.
Wow. Did you have a shirt for Yoritomo's Alliance as well?
Yeah,
Wow.
we did.
We did.
Well, okay. Well, let's be clear. We were selling those shirts too. So everybody who was in the tournament got the shirt for their clan, but then you could buy shirts. And so not only were the shirts on people who were playing, there were shirts everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still have a complete set of all those shirts in my archive.
One of my most treasured gifts was my wife took all of my L5R shirts and all of the Day of Thunder shirts and had a quilt made.
Yeah,
of
pretty
them.
cool.
Oh,
And
amazing.
I won't even use it. I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is like a piece of history that I don't, I should use it, but."
It's been hallowed on the grounds of gaming history, though.
Right.
Yeah. So that Yoritomo player faced a guy named Steve Swarner, who was the world champion the year prior to that. And Steve was a magnificent player. And I was walking around the room and he was playing against this kid, and it looked like he had swallowed a frog.
Yeah, he didn't want to win.
He had this look on his face like he was in trouble, like he was going to get beat by this guy. And I was like, "Hey, Steve, what's up?" And he was like choked up the way I am. And I said, "Did he do all right?" He's like, "No, he's going to be out." And I said, "What's wrong?" He says, "I don't want to be the guy to knock that guy out of the tournament."
Right.
Crazy.
That's incredible. The way that the fans interacted and kind of lived the story at that point. Like, I've heard also about some corrupt Phoenix that were also like spoilers in there. Like,
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah. For real.
So the last day of the show, we decided to host the top 16. Was it top 16 in our booth? It might have been 32, top 16 or 32 players. The final day was going to happen in our booth. We cleared everything out and put tables in there. And like that could never happen today, because we did not understand how many people cared about actually watching this event. I mean, hundreds of people packed into the halls and into the booth, and it just stopped traffic in every direction. If you had a booth near our booth,
I can hear the Gen Con fire marshal like coming to get you.
They weren't real happy. I mean, they were happy because it was happening, but they weren't real happy because it was a problem.
and there was a representative from every major clan in the final day. And John had these envelopes with the clan's names on them. And as the tournament went on, when a round was over, he would jump up on a chair and he would orate a story, just like make it up on the spot about what happened in the battle that caused that clan to die, right? Like to be done, to not have their chance to win the Day of Thunder. And as he was telling their stories, he would take their envelopes and rip them in half as if like this is the story of how how the scorpion wins the Day of Thunder. That story will not be told, right? And so for each clan, their envelopes got ripped up until we got to the final four, which was Crane versus Phoenix and Lion versus Phoenix. Both the Phoenix players lost, and we ended up with a Crane versus Lion finale, which could not have worked out better for the story because of the the love stories and all the characters that had sort of driven towards that. It was the best story. One of the kids that was playing the Phoenix clan. Oh, this is like every time I tell the story, I get so choked up. After John had like ripped up the scorpion, the Phoenix envelope and told the Phoenix story, he jumped up on a chair next to John and ripped off his Phoenix shirt, and he had a Shadowland shirt on underneath it. And he said, "I am the corrupt master of Earth. If I had won Gen Con, 1,000 years of darkness."
Wow.
And we had already ripped up the Shadowlands envelope and told the story of how they weren't going to win the Day of Thunder. And it was just a moment that you can't make up. I mean, it was stunned silence again from the crowd. And then a gigantic eruption from everybody who were like, holy crap, now the Shadowlands is actually out. And you couldn't believe that maybe we had not staged that moment, but we had literally taken all of these people and given them so much investment in the story and in the characters and in the things that they could do, that they were telling the story, with us. That guy had a moment that was as big as any of John's moments, ripping up the envelopes and telling the story of, how the tournament ends. And the amazing thing is that the Lion and the Crane both went to John before they played their match and they said, "We don't care who wins. We want to strike the killing blow together. We want to win. Like, we don't want one of us to lose and the other one to win in the story. We want the story to be how we work together to stop Wolverine." And that was the story.
Yeah, it's legendary stuff at this point. And then to hear you say, oh, it wasn't planned and all of this was really just on the spot, the oral histories of it and the fan participation is really incredible. I want to see if there's any other like Day of Thunder memories that really stand out for you.
I mean, there was some crazy stuff that happened.
Wow, those are the two stories I tell that really tear me up.
In the second year of the ARC, the World Championship at Gen Con, people around the world they had spontaneously started to pledge stuff.
Yeah.
If their champion won the championship. It started off small. It was like, I'll pledge 1,000 koku. And then it kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it turned out that there was a guy who played L5R in the UK, and he might have been one of Mark Wooten's friends, who just happened to work at the Steuben Crystal Company. And he had commissioned a crystal katana that he donated for if his champion won the world championship. And I'm pretty sure that thing got made and that somebody got that thing.
Yeah, no, he was the Crane Clan player ended up with the katana, and there were bounties had become a thing inside of L5R.
Yeah.
Because the storyline was driven by winning events for the most part.
Yeah. I think the first year we gave away a really, really nice sword as the trophy for winning. And it felt a little cheap because it was a nice sword, but it was like a sword we bought, We found some sword company, we bought a sword. It's not like we commissioned some Japanese master to make an actual sword. That we weren't like that. That wasn't us. So the second year, we wanted to do something that was better than just, some store-bought thing. And there was, at the time, I don't remember all the details, there was a reason that Hida Kasada's, his big club, his Tetsubo, was going to be retired. He had died. There was going to be a funeral. So I had my dad make one.
Wow.
So the prize for the championship that year is a full-size like Japanese thing that my dad like went to the library and researched all this stuff. He talked to some friends that had like Japanese woodworking tools and got the right stuff. He got wood that was imported from Japan. Like that thing was amazing. It's just a big stick, but it is a real thing. It was like a real artifact from the world of Rokugan that we materialized, at Gen Con as the reward, as the trophy for that tournament. So there's stuff like that out there. There's like these real world things that somebody made that have some connection to the world that are more than just a painting or, a store-bought thing that has a tag on it. Like they're real in some sense that a lot of things aren't real.
Like relics of L5R's history.
Yeah, exactly. There's only one. No one else has that thing. Like there's only one of them. Right. Yeah. It's special.
Yeah.
So it was years after the Day of Thunder before we gave Europe a similar moment as far as an event was concerned. And I remember that we decided that we were going to do a big world championship in Europe. We were going to host it in Brussels. And we went out of our way to try to figure out how to make that event as interesting and cool as possible. I flew over there and went and looked at a bunch of different locations, tried to figure out how to host an event of the size that a world championship was. And we ended up in a location that had a cave in it. You used to have a cave where they used to store wine and like a cellar, right? And it was an event hall with all sorts of tables and stuff. So it was fantastic for the actual event itself. And the storyline was focused around getting, stealing or claiming a gift that was made for your different clans. And so where you placed in the event meant that you got to pick first. And we named what those things were before the event and before we had gone out and tried to get them.
Oh.
And so we spent a lot of time trying to recreate these things that were the
artifacts.
I don't remember exactly what they were called, but the artifacts of the different clans that had power to that clan. And our magicians that came with us took that cave and draped cloth over it and built tables, and man, they made it look like a tomb that had all of these artifacts displayed in it.
Wow.
And if you won the tournament, you got to go in and grab an artifact from this tomb based on where you placed in the event. And you didn't have to take your artifact. You could go in and take another clan's artifact, which was part of the story. And so, the room was amazing. The area that the players gathered in to see people go into the tomb and make the choices. The fact that they came out and some of them didn't come out with their own artifact, and we were telling stories on the spot about it. It was just for the European community, that moment was to them what the Day of Thunder was to so many other people. And I was glad that we were able to sort of do two events in different parts of the world that meant so much to different communities, because there was always a group of people from Europe who would make the trip over to play in the United States.
Yeah.
And the play styles in those two places was magnificently different, right? Like American players played a very specific way and European players played a different way. And seeing them sort of intermix and mingle and play their different styles was just a thing of beauty. And the best player in Europe ended up winning the European Championship with a rattling deck of all things that was magical to a level. He had built it in a way that it just responded to it could respond to any deck that he faced in ways that the people that were playing against him could not believe that he was able to respond to attacks, to honor enlightenment. There was just so many ways that people tried to stop that rattling deck, and it had an answer to them every time.
It's incredible. Do you have any photos of that event, in your archives somewhere? Or?
And one of the problems of the early days of Legend of the Five Rings is that there were not cell phones.
Right. Yeah.
And so we have pictures all the way back to when cell phones started becoming a commonplace. And I know that we took pictures, but we were in the moment and things were happening and nobody was like, hey, bring your camera so that we can get pictures of this stuff.
Your giant loud camera.
Yeah. So no, we don't really have that many that many pictures of these beautiful moments. They live, like, I don't think we even have a picture of that tomb lives in the heads of the people who actually saw it, and nowhere else. I don't think anybody took a picture of it that I know of.
I got to say, and I'm riffing off of the stuff that Matt Colville says in his his amazing video about the greatest story ever told. That is part of the reason why it was so amazing. You kind of had to be there. We'll never live in that world again, ever. That world where you could be the only, you saw a thing and you remember it and you can tell people about it, but there's really no other evidence that it ever existed. That world will never exist again. And that was kind of what made L5R magical. People who were there and saw these things created an oral history and told each other what they saw and what happened and what was done. And because it's oral or it's traditional, it doesn't have to be true. People can remember things the way they wanted to remember it, and they can flavor it with their own color and make the story work the way they want it to work, because no one can pop up and say, well, actually, nope. John's memory of that thing is all there will ever be, is John's story about what he saw and what he remembers, and that's it. And it's just part of what makes it amazing.
Yeah, and they're like tall tales, right? They've grown in magnitude the farther and farther away, and the more tellings that happen of those events. Everybody's a good storyteller, and so with each time the story gets told, they add a little bit to the legend that is Legend of the Five Rings.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on for today. My conversation with John and Ryan continues in the next episode of the 30 Years of Legend of the Five Rings podcast. Join me next time for their take on what gave L5R its staying power, a behind-the-scenes look at some of the most memorable and challenging products they produced, and how a miraculous discovery in the Shadowlands saved the game from an untimely demise. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. This audio recording is copyright Asmodee North America Incorporated, 2025. All rights reserved. Produced and published by Aconyte Books. Legend of the Five Rings and the Legend of the Five Rings logo are trademarks or registered trademarks of Asmodee North America. Stay up to date with all the news from Rokugan and sign up for the official newsletter at l5r.com. Subscribe to the Play to Win podcast from Aconyte Books for more episodes of 30 Years of Legend of the Five Rings.